Hello, this is the Terry Nutlop Model Railway Station, a light here for all things model railways. Now today we're going to be quickly dealing with the back scene of the model railway, and then we're going to go straight on to making the heels with some PVA glue and some kitchen roll. So let's make a start. My name is Michael Train, if you want. Now, I'm here to tell you all about back scenes. Now, the one thing you've got to remember with back scenes is they must complement the layout and not dominate it. Okay? So, always use muted colours on your back scene because colours fade with distance. Colours fade with distance. Also, if you're a bit pony at painting, I'm not, I think you'll agree, my self-portrait is the absolute spit. Well, if you're pony at painting, always buy something in for an exhibition layout or use a sky or a muted grey colour. Otherwise, the viewers will think you're a right muppet. So, also, last point to remember, on an exhibition layout, the back scene has to be high enough because the viewers don't want to see your knobbly knees or your sweaty buttocks when they're looking at your layout. Okay, I'm off to my private villa in Monaco where I shall bang on about jellied eels and how great the East End is. I will see you in another episode. Nice one. Well, thank you there for Michael for flying all the way in from the south of France to tell us about back scenes. That was very interesting, Michael. So, as you can see, all I've done on the back scene of this model railway at the moment is painted it with a matte. Now, that's quite important to use matte paint rather than silk or gloss. A matte emulsion paint in a blue light sky colour. And as it's drying, I've just basically scraped it off with a cloth. Now, this is one way to make clouds, and I'll show you another way to make clouds with the board. So this is just a piece of A3 size foam board, and I've painted it with the same matte sky blue emulsion as I've used on the model railway. Now, you may notice, if I hold the board at an angle to you, that it's warped. It's actually warped in both directions. Now, this will happen because painting it on just one side will tend to make the whole thing twist up. If you paint it on the other side, which I haven't on this one as an example, it will straighten up. Don't try to bend it and twist it back. It bent on the back scene in the same way. It all bent forwards, and all I did was painted the back scene on the reverse side with a black emulsion. It could be any colour. I just used an emulsion, and you must use the same type of paint. So if you use an emulsion or an enamel, just paint the reverse with the same type of paint that you've used and it will straighten back out. Don't try to force it or bend it. It will damage the board and you'll get a crease on it and it will never look the same again. So basically paint both sides and you'll get rid of this bending. I've just left it like that to show you what will happen when you only paint one side. So let's just get straight on to do some other forms of clouds. So what I've done here, I've got some neat white acrylic paint. I'm dabbing it with some water. We'll do some clouds. Now you can do clouds however you want. I'm doing it upside down here, so it's not quite perfect. You can make clouds as any patterns you like because clouds are pretty much whatever they are. You can see clouds of any shapes and sizes in the sky. So we just do some clouds like this. I think the idea is pretty much there. A little bit of water to thin it down. Or you can use a cloth like so and just dab around. Now, there we go. Straight away, you've got some fairly realistic clouds. They can be whatever you want. Of course, you could use an airbrush. You can use all sorts of things to make clouds. And basically, a sky with clouds is the primary start to a back scene. On our model railway, this is all we're going to stick with, but there are some other options that you can go on to, and I'll show you those now. So with the clouds already starting to dry, another option you can do is to use little cutouts. Now what I've done is taken pictures straight from the internet, and I've put them on my phone. And what I've done with the printer, I've got an Epson printer, but any printer has pretty much the same thing. They pretty much all come with a program that you can download onto your phone or onto your computer, and it allows you to adjust the sizes of photographs. So what I've done with this photograph from the internet, which was just a picture of a country barn, I've adjusted it in size to make it fit the layout. And you can just simply print it out onto a matte paper and then stick it where you like. If, as I've done here, a church, you can add all different sorts of bits and pieces. You can overlay them. The more accurately you cut them out, the better they'll look. You could also paint a very basic green hillside behind them, which would make them look more realistic, and so on and so forth. You can have whatever you want. You could even take a picture of your house. There we are. There's my house. Now, that could be very good. And you can take a picture of where you work, your house, and you can make up a whole collage of different buildings on the back scene and do whatever you want. And this can be done basically for the cost of a bit of paper and a printer. All you need is a printer at home, which a lot of people have. If you don't have a printer, then you can always try to paint it on yourself. If not, just leave it as the sky. Now, Dawn Quest from Model Railway Quest shows you a very good example of how you can do this with Canva, and it's worth checking out. Check out her channel at Model Railway Quest. She does a very good episode of how to use Canva to make a back scene. The only problem is that she has to send it off via an email, and the printer actually prints off the whole back scene for her. Now this costs about £35, something like that. Now if we want to keep the cost down, we can just use these little cutouts and make them ourselves. It's totally up to you. The back scene is what you want to do. So you just carry on and do whatever you want to do on the back scene. It's not important. Just remember, the main point of the back scene is to block your view to the other side of the layout. It mustn't be overwhelming. It's just there to give the illusion that the trains come from somewhere and go to somewhere. So we're going to leave this now. We're going to move straight on to doing the hills with some kitchen roll and some PVA glue. So I'm off now to get some glue to do the hillsides. We've got a visitor that's come all the way from the Hedron Collider at Churn, and he's going to say something to keep us amused while I get the glue. Ah, yes, now, hello, how are you? Excellent, excellent. Yes, Terence has asked me just to stand in apparently while he's going and getting some sort of glue or something of that nature. And he's just asked me, I believe in the trade it's called to fill in, to do a slot, so to speak, yes. So I said I'd be delighted, I'd absolutely be delighted. And yes, so as I was saying to Terence, you know, I said that you think that double O is small, and then of course you've got to engage, and of course Z, and then of course even T, which is even smaller. But I said, you know, once you get down to those quarks, you know, then you really are dealing with something very, very tiny indeed. And I said, you really will struggle to see them even with a very strong magnifying glass. And of course it went over his head, you know, because he doesn't realise how devilishly small those quarks are. But as I was saying to Dr. Lee Shung Lao at the Hedron Collider only the other week, I said we can't all be theoretical mathematicians or scientists, can we? Otherwise we'd be quite literally up to our elbows in sigma over gamma to the power delta squared. We did laugh. Yes, so very good single malt scotch, I must say. Terence does keep a very good single malt scotch. Yeah, so to use Terence is, I believe he's coming back in a moment. He's got some sort of glue or something to do the next part with. So, yes, as I was saying, working at the Hedron Collider, you know, one deals in physics and all that sort of thing. It's very exciting, very interesting. But I must say model railways are equally interesting in a weird way. It suits all types, doesn't it? So, yes, I believe he's coming back now, yes. So, excellent. Yes, excellent. Okay, so thanks to Dr. Tuckworth there for coming all the way over from CERN and the Hadron Collider. That was very interesting and great. He doesn't really want me to tell you this, but because he came over on Swiss Air, he indulged in the quadruple cheese large bap, and it bunged him up a bit. But being a mathematician, of course, he worked it out with a pencil. So let's crack on, and what we're going to be using now is kitchen roll. Now, I would recommend using something, there are different makes of kitchen roll available, of course, but use a decent, what I would call a quality kitchen roll, rather than one of the basic cheap ones, because the cheaper economy kitchen rolls tend to fall apart with the glue, whereas these thicker, and they're described as the type of kitchen roll that soaks things up, and the once and whatever they're called. All of these types of kitchen rolls that are strong are the better type to use because they won't fall apart. And they're also going to be using, I'll put that to one side here, we're also going to be using a glue. Now this is just a PVA glue again, and I've used basically 3/4 PVA glue mixed with 1/4 water. Doesn't have to be exact, but that's the rough idea. You don't want to be using neat glue right at this minute. We'll be using the glue neat later on. So let's just crack on and make a start with this. Right, so what we're going to be doing is just taking single sheets of the kitchen roll. We're going to just gently dip them into the glue. It's very watery like this, and that's what we want. And then we're just going to be placing them roughly, filling up the gaps. Now with this idea, we're just using them to fill up the void. Now you can absolutely soak these in glue if you like, or you can just dip them in the glue gently. It really doesn't matter. The more glue that you have on the kitchen roll, the longer it will take to dry out, and at the same time, the stiffer it will all end up being when it dries. So it's a bit of a compromise, as most things are, but what I'm doing here is just dipping them into the glue. Now, what you don't want to be doing is compressing these down and crushing them into a sort of zero space, because you're just wasting the kitchen roll and making the whole thing heavier than it needs to be. I'm actually wiping the glue off my fingers with a piece before I dip it in. And you're just going to use this like so, building up the basic shape of the landscape. Now, again, what we're doing is using quite a bit of kitchen roll, but at the end of the day, you've got to remember that the kitchen roll doesn't weigh a lot, and it fills in the gap. Oh, poor old Desmond's just fell over there. So we're using the kitchen roll just to fill up the gaps, dipping it in the glue, and dipping it in the glue allows it to stick where we want. If we don't, and I'll just show you, if we just screw up a bit of kitchen roll and place it where we want, it just opens up again. So by dipping it very vaguely and gently in the glue, it gives it that little bit of attachment, if that's the word, so that it will take the shape. I'm going to fill the whole layer in, doing it like this with the screwed up kitchen roll, and then we'll come back and start putting the surface layer on. So Desmond has sloped off after his rather embarrassing tumble earlier. He's gone off to get a bit of nose bag. He's very partial to some layers, pellets and algae mixed together. Very strange chap. Anyway, so we're going to carry on. Now what I've done, I've covered the whole layout now with the crunched up kitchen roll, and I've torn the kitchen roll into strips now. We're going to start using nearly neat PVA glue to attach them. This is the PVA glue that settled to the bottom of the pot as we mixed it together. So if I can attach or detach the brush from the kitchen roll I had it laying on, there we go. It's fairly thick, not quite neat PVA glue, and we just brush it on. Again, I'm going to actually dip that into the pot and attach it in strips. This whole process is quite messy. I enjoy this part because this is where you form the landscape shape. Now, as you go, you're going to just have to make your mind up as to what sort of shapes you want. In places, the landscape will rise up and fall down. If it's a bit lower than you want it to be, you can basically add a little bit more kitchen roll underneath and increase the depth. If it's too high, you can just basically push it down with your fingers. And the idea here is we're just layering up the top surface. Now, there's no real skill or sort of correct right way to do this. Keep going, layering up the kitchen roll until you've got the basic shape of a landscape going. There we go. Now what I'm doing there is just putting some glue across the kitchen roll itself to attach it down. We'll put some on the edge here to attach it down to that road bit there, and so on. And we simply keep going like this. It's basically paper mache, but we're using PVA glue rather than a flour and water. And we just keep going like so, spreading the glue out. I always tend to use at least 2 layers of kitchen roll. When you put the second layer on, you can just basically lay the kitchen roll on and it will attach because the first layer is already covered in glue. And then we can use the PVA glue again to spread it down and attach it. And we carry on like so. It's all pretty basic stuff. But what you've got to do here is take your time. Now obviously I'm doing this at a funny angle and I'm sort of half watching the layout, trying to look at the camera. It's all a bit weird and wonderful, but this is the way you do it. So when we come back, you'll see the finished layout with the complete strips covered in PVA glue. And once we've made 2 or 3 layers and then finished them off with a neat coating of PVA glue, I'll show you the finished layout. So about 2 hours have passed now, and I've finished covering the whole layout with the kitchen roll and the PVA glue. And on the top layer, I've just covered it with neat PVA glue, which, if you can see, has run down slightly in the road area there, and that's fine because that actually can give quite a good effect of mud or something like that being washed off the hillside because it's flowing in a natural way. So I'm going to leave that. If you want to, you could have cleaned that up with a bit of kitchen roll or just brushed it off as it runs down. But I'm going to leave that because I think that's going to create quite a good effect. I've taken my time, and I suggest that you take your time and basically just do it piece by piece. The only thing to avoid is getting really a lot of glue on the track. If you do drop glue on the track, wipe it away immediately. Otherwise, it gets a bit messy, but that's fine. And you'll end up with something like this. Of course, you could have the hillside extending further. You could have hills in the corners if you wanted to. It's exactly the same principle. And basically, it's just carrying on to do what you want to do. So what I'm going to do now is put the layout away, and we're going to say a little cheery byes. So the layout's going to take at least 72 hours to dry out properly. It may take longer. It depends on the heat of your room and where you're keeping it, but keep it level and eventually the glue will dry out. I would say at least 72 hours, and then have a little test push of it. Gently poke it with your finger, and if it's still squidgy, then it's not set. If it's nice and solid, it's set. It's as simple as that. So I would like to say thank you very much if you've watched this far. Thank you very much to the thousands of people who've watched already. And thank you to the thousands of people who've liked this show. It's very important that you like and subscribe, as I've said before, because it's free to you and that's how YouTube understands that this show is appreciated by the viewers. I appreciate you, and I'd like to think that YouTube think the same. Now, YouTube's been saying to me that already they're suggesting that I increase memberships and have some sort of paid membership way of raising funds. And I can assure you, I promise you this, that I will never do that. Because to me, the whole point of YouTube is it should be free. And I will never have memberships. I understand why other channels do. But to me, YouTube should be free to the viewers. It's a way of knowledge. It's a whole process of understanding. And all I ask is that you like and subscribe. And that way it shares it amongst YouTube to other viewers. Because this channel isn't about me. It's about you. It's about you watching the channel and hopefully developing your skills, getting confidence and doing something that you thought you couldn't do before. Because model railways are for everyone and there's nothing secretive or greatly skilled about them. It's just a case of having a go. And if someone has a go when they didn't think they could, then that's my reward. So I'd like to just say thank you on behalf of me and Desmond, and of course Michael Train, and of course Dr Oswold Tuckworth flying all the way over from Switzerland. I'd just like to say thank you again, and a usual catchphrase, nice one. I'll see you next time.